we the Central Powers can win World War I. This will prove whether they could have done it or not. No, not at all. This is just a war game that's, pretty decent. But now let's check and make sure I am streaming where we need to. It says for YouTube still sending data. Oh, now we're streaming there. Are we actually... make sure. Yeah. Yes. Okay. Right. Okay. Looks like we're live on the interwebs. Everyone say hi. No one's here yet. Okay. No eyeballs yet. Oh, Writer M is here. Well, good. Hello. Right. Well, we are, of course, playing Strategic Command World War I, the main game. I've jumped into a playthrough that I was doing as a personal one that is fairly late, October 1917. Current world situation, we'll push out here. Turkey is on the back foot. They've lost basically all of Iraq. Well, they're holding Mosul up here. They've really been pushed in by the Russians, but the Germans and the Austrians, when that was really getting... And hello, Arno. Good to have you here on Twitch. And I had been holding less along the German frontier and the Austrian frontier. But as more and more effort was being put down here, I decided to do an offensive up here to try to save Turkey, if you will. So we did that to make the Russians react. And we've been playing what I consider a smart war of attrition with, and hello, Arno, over on YouTube, on the Western Front. And so that, that is and Italy, we had sort of the Italians had some success, and we're now pushing the Italians back. I like what Warplan did with the Navy, and that you could stack the Navy. I think it's a little too you can't really build fleets with the Navy. Let's try to hide down here. Okay, there we go. Now, because we see here readiness 39 and morale 18. They've been pounded pretty hard. Here we have readiness 59 and morale 43. So we're going to swap those out. And they've gone down because they've moved a bit, right? But now we're going to reinforce to the max this unit here, which is better, but still not as good here. So that, and then we will move out and okay, this is why okay, we're going to quit. And this is why I just obviously loaded in a save. We're going to come back here and reload in a save. Because no, I would not have moved the one unit out of the line if I knew that I couldn't load. Couldn't move the other one in. And so it's really frustrating. This is what frustrates me. It's not, oh, I didn't like that die roll, I want to take it over again. It's, here. It's these, I can't tell what I can or can't do. Yeah, they're just mostly defending, but keeping there. Okay, we put forward back. Don't have any action points, but hopefully they'll be able to hold many attacks, as there's not going to be a whole lot moving right up there. Hello! Oh, let's see. What is it? Alien time lapse? Alien time lapse? Sorry, I don't mean to be butchering that. Okay, so that's our current Turkish forces. A little closer to the front with them. Try to keep everybody supplied. Here, I think we're doing pretty good with our positioning. Yeah, I think. Just a second. Okay, yes, these are all entrenched. So I do think it would be better with us being entrenched for them to attack us than for us to pound our heads against them. Now, when we get the artillery where we can have 6 shells but no action points at this moment, get in there and isolate and overwhelm a unit, then yes, get ready to push there. Now here, you out here, let's move the core up here. So we have I think we'll leave them there for the moment. I want to move them up into Austrian territory just to have, Austrian territory, just to have a bit of a, units there. If Austria decides, or not Austria, if Romania decides to join the war. And they might. But, no, we don't have 2 rounds left. We'll hold off on that. Okay, yes, we need to move you. We'll hide this turn on here. Okay. You guys are coming back. Through the minefields. There we go. You have been upgraded. No, you haven't. Subs. Excuse me. Wow, I had to sneeze there. Oh. These guys upgraded to advanced subs. Not that they're, their attack values are a bit better. But well, they have been upgraded. Okay. Well, let's come out to here. We'll make another run once we get out. Okay, you and you are coming back home. You've been beat up out there. Okay, now let's go sit on the supply lines to Russia. Ouch. Okay, run away. Hide. Hide. Yeah. I think we have mostly last playthrough dealt with the Western Front, but just want to check if anything needs or can do reinforcements. Yeah, we'll go to 11 on that. I often don't like going to 11 on frontline units because it's more expensive to go to 11, and it's very easily, knocked off. So cost per factor goes up. But with something that sits behind the lines like artillery, it's less likely to get it down. Okay, so we can get an additional. Well, let's go with the cavalry corps. Useful on the Eastern Front. Bulgaria is fully built out. They're basically fully built out. And they have a core that can be brought back in. And research for particularly Austria because they have a lot of points. 40, so we'll do that. I don't know if they want to advance. It's only 50. We'll do that. Weapons. Okay. Let's let the Entente have its turn. Okay, Chief of the General Staff for Germany. We have received an interesting proposal from Max Zapita, the former head of the medical corps in German Southwest Africa. I should actually learn how to speak, shouldn't I? Zapita, I don't know, proposes that our Zeppelins are now capable of staying in the air for more than 100 hours. One could be used to supply von Leto Vorbeck in East Africa. The suggestion derives consideration as it has support of a number of prominent people, including the Navy Minister and, most importantly, the Kaiser himself. Would you like to authorize an expedition of 35 MPP on that mission would cost? Now, we have 190. We're doing pretty good. Yes, Lauren Arno says yes. I think we will. Okay, long-range aircraft. Infantry warfare for Germany is improved. Austria-Hungary develops infantry weapons level 2. That means a lot of, but we have the points, a lot of upgrades. Scientists report progress in aerial warfare. Good. And industrial technology, they'll get even more MPP. Infantry weapons, so they're getting better. Do you like RTS strategic games? Well, it depends on what you're saying with RTS. Uh-oh. You got spotted. If they're good RTS, yes. And, I mean, you could say that about anything, but some of the stuff I see advertised as RTS games, to me, are just sort of silly. But if they're done well, yes. Here's my mod sword. I don't know, Arno. I thought you were still a mod on YouTube. Who were you going to chop? Ooh, they got hit hard. And dives. Hey, Sing! Yes, bots and stupid people, but I didn't see anybody here right now that were either bots or stupid. Well, our advanced subs are working out very well. Oh, hello, Foka. Didn't see you up there. Company of Heroes? I think I know which game that is. Yeah, well, some other time we can get in and look and see what the settings are, Arna. Oh, day's great. Sing, I'm hanging out playing war games, chatting with people on the interwebs. It's a good day. The French come after my subs. Oops. Well, traded about equal. Germany could have won World War I if they made different decisions. Hello, Holiday Punch. Yes. Now, we often look at, could X country have won Y war that they lost historically? We do often look at that. But we often look at it in a way that is how do I put this? Is at its height or at its full extent. There's a lot of people that look at, could Germany have won World War II, which is a war I know much better than World War I. Well, yeah, of course Germany could have won World War II. Not starting in 1942 with the conditions as prevailed in 1942, meaning the U.S. was, just starting to get into war in 42. This is, December 7th, 41. So that's, just at the end of 41. And with the conditions in Russia and whatnot, Germany isn't going to be winning World War II at that point, in my opinion. No, it isn't. I'm thinking of a few things, but they're already bogged down in Russia and whatnot. But if we look at it as instead of invading Russia, what if Germany had pushed hard against Britain? Or what if Chamberlain had replaced, if Chamberlain's replacement was, oh boy, I keep forgetting this guy's name. the other guy, not Churchill. Um, that was a serious option to go in. Uh, you know that he might have compromised and did a an armistice with Germany. There's a lot of things that we could look at. But by the time you get, Russian army is weakened by mutinies and desertions. By the time you're looking at, the height of the war, yet no, Germany is locked into losing. Okay, well, I don't know if we are dealing with starving citizens right now, Holiday Punch. Only have won in 1914 because they had the best chance there. Not able to take Paris, basically set motions for defeat. I don't know. Germany could have regained superiority from the Blitz in 40 and 41, 42. Halifax, yes, that's who I was thinking of. For some reason, I keep blanking on his name. Halifax, yes. He was more likely to compromise. Yeah, and so, had Germany, instead of trying to just support Italy with, minimum support in North Africa, sending down Rommel and going, oh, hey, yeah, here's a few troops and whatnot. Had they really gone hard into the Mediterranean in, in 41, at the beginning of 41, and taken Egypt, had taken, well, maybe even Gibraltar, but definitely taken Malta, and really made it difficult and have the ability that when there was something like a torch landing, instead of Rommel retreating out of the El Alamein battle to Tunisia, and then only then is Germany sending in an army. It goes from the Afrika Korps to Panzer Armee Africa. Had they really done that earlier on, and had linking up with Iran or Persia or whatever you want to call it in the east, if the Americans did a torch landing, there very well may have been a lot of reserves that the Germans could have pushed down and thrown the Americans out of North Africa, which would have shaken America's thinking on its ability to, do amphibious invasions. Also like that if Germany focused on helping Italy out, yes, instead of attacking, because Germany loses in Africa, the supply issues of just having horrible Italian allies. Absolutely. Or, do that. And then, in 42, invade Russia or Soviet Union or whatever you want to call it. But with Britain, armisted out or whatever, because if you get, the world looks different. If Britain signs an armistice in 41, that even, includes eventual withdrawal of some German forces from places like Belgium and the Netherlands and France. And, looks different, and Japan might not, do its stupid thing of attacking, America and Britain. You very well could have seen an America that was reluctant to just jump into the war. So that would then allow Germany to really prepare for the invasions of Russia, and I'm thinking territory as opposed to the political Soviet Union, and do so in a way that would have allowed them to succeed. Because this is the other thing that people look at way too much. And my life have definitely been guilty of this too. Looking at numbers of tanks and planes and their effectiveness and battleships and submarines and all this other stuff. One of some of my maxims are Politics is perception. Do the people perceive that the government is doing a good job? Or, whether a good job or the best job, practical or whatever, do they? Whether they are or not is another matter, but are they perceived as doing a good job? It doesn't matter the reality. Well, the political reality is the perception, the actual perception, not necessarily the propaganda being pushed out by government spokespeople or the media or whatever. It's the actual perceptions of the people. One. And two, warfare is a political act. So, if you, in your initial invasion of the Soviet Union, your first 6 months, you take Moscow and one of them was always known to be a key city, but it becomes a bit more apparent, Stalingrad out here. If you take one of those two, along with Moscow, in the first 6 months, the Soviet Union may have collapsed, okay? It may have, because it would have looked like an inevitable German victory. Now, if you take Moscow and one of those other cities 2 or 3 years into the war, into the hard slog, well, if everything else is going reasonably well in the Soviet Union, which doesn't necessarily mean it would be, but it very well may stick to the war and keep fighting, because if they're still holding Leningrad, we're looking at World War II and not I here, and you're still being able to pump in supplies through Murmansk and Archangel, or if you've lost Leningrad and can't easily move supplies that way, but you're still holding down here at Stalingrad or other places, huge amounts of Lend-Lease came through Persia. So, Lend-Lease can keep them alive. So you have that kind of factors. And let's see what the chat has been saying. Germany sitting idle and ignoring the Mediterranean. Yes, they did. Foka, very much so. If they won in Egypt, they would have gained access to the Middle East oil fields. Okay, but there's issues. Okay, yes, you're getting holiday cause of the British Navy. Absolutely. Had Japan not attacked Hawaii, it probably would have delayed the U.S. from entering the... Okay, now, here's the other thing, is perception, again, politics. Had FDR, and I think he would have been capable of it, dragged America into World War II, it would have looked a very different World War II than what it was for the American people. Because Japan attacks, and it's an added surprise attack, then the American people are outraged. And it was probably 44 or some year like that, over one of the invasions in the Pacific Islands, Tarawa or Iwo Jima or some of them, I don't know. Some San Francisco newspaper publishes the casualty figures, which are very high. And it was either sailors or Marines or both go into the offices and smash up the place. And the government doesn't send them in. They're just so upset that this has been published. The American people do not know not just, X number of people, because they weren't publishing X number of people died today or anything like that. They were, of course, sending out death notices and all that. So people were getting their death notices of sons or husbands or whatever being lost at war. And sure, that, can be a big number, but what's that as a percentage of the battle? If the battle is, hey, you've taken 1/3 dead, that's a hell of a lot. Taking some island you've never heard of, maybe this war isn't worth fighting. And similarly, if you're battling Germany and you're taking not terrible casualties, but you're taking more casualties, you find people unwilling to accept it. And here's over Vietnam and some of the other wars, the news media, which is controlled by, and we'll get to some of the other stuff, I know I'm ranting about things, but the news media is controlled by the left. And you can if you actually look at Walter Cronkite's actual politics, I'm not saying he's full-on communist, but he is a lefty. And he presents himself as just a good old American. I mean like socialist type lefty. Which back in the 50s and the 60s was not just good old American ideas or opinions, even on the Democrats or the Republican side. And so when he comes on the nightly news over the Tet Offensive and how terrible it is going for the Americans, which the Americans are winning and kicking butt in it, but it's perceived that we lost it. We can get into some of that some other time maybe, but they're creating the perception that the Americans losing in Vietnam, and they're focusing on all the caskets coming home, the caskets, the dead. And they're showing the caskets being taken off the airplanes and the crying families and on the news media. Well, they tried that with the war in Afghanistan particularly. But the Americans were so outraged over 9/11 that it didn't have the effect they were looking at. So, yeah, even in battles in Europe, Americans would be questioning the cost of the war, including the cost in disrupting their lives, blackouts and rationing and all this other stuff. But because Japan attacked, there was oh shit, you attacked us? Now fuck you, we're coming for you. So yes, okay, Singh has had some adventure or something, and maybe we'll hear about it. Stalin did say he would not leave Moscow, but I don't know if he would have stayed if the Germans had been able to. And yeah, I don't believe stuff coming out of the Soviet Union at all. And when Stalin says something, well, that's hindsight. Even if it's just a day or two's hindsight that, the Germans are stopped. And so he'll say, yeah, I wasn't leaving. I was never going to leave. Whether he had his bags packed or not, we don't necessarily know. Okay, Trump administration has put fees of $100,000 on H-1B. Yeah, I'm very much in favor of that. Singh, just a little modern politics. I think it was yesterday that Trump signed a presidential directive, which he can do because it's affecting a federal government department and setting the fees up. You can, if you want to have a golden ticket to America, it's like $2 million. So if you can come up with $2 million and I guess hopefully pass a good background check, not be an Islamic terrorist or something, you can come in as, a resident alien with permission to work or whatever. So, and this is where, H-1B visas, these are meant in theory to be getting the best and the brightest of the world, stealing it from places like India. Who wants to live in India? Come and live in America. And if you're, and we'll get your smartest people from India to America kind of idea. But what it has also been is, hey, Indians that are well, yes, may have had his motorcade waiting outside very well. And we wouldn't know that easily. I mean, I'm not saying that there's no records, but, or concurrent testimony, meaning somebody's writing a diary that day that, I was ordered to, get the motorcade ready to go, as opposed to talking about it in the hindsight, which of course people can make things up, but even well-trained professionals in India going, hey, they're willing to work for half, a third, well, maybe more like 2/3 of what an American would want for that same professional job in America. So a lot of companies have been hiring, particularly Indians. I like Indians, but I don't, Indians are foreigners. And we need to look out after Americans first, then other people's. So, so it's not having anything to do. Actually, mid-skilled workers, high workers still qualify for green cards directly, not need. Okay, well, mid-skilled workers then, FOCA, or folk, or however you want to say that. I know who you are. And it's meant to be, we can't find people with those skills in enough numbers here in America. That's what it's meant to be. But, you know, any system is open to abuse. So systems get abused. I'm even sure these changes will get abused. But now that it's $100,000 annually that you have to pay people to come in, well, people say it's killed it. Well, maybe. But and is that too high? I don't know that it's too high, because, you know, we need to balance it. Really what you need to do is you need to have an incentive system that you want to hire Americans first for every single job at every single level. Okay? And then, whether it's a skill issue or people not wanting to live in Minnesota because it gets fucking cold in the winter, and in the summer it gets, well, maybe not super hot, but gets sort of kind of hot. So it's not the greatest place to live, not like California or something. And there's just not enough people willing to live in Minnesota who can do a particular job. So, and, you know, get a visa worker, not a permanent resident, meaning if the job goes away, they go home to whatever country. We're not importing citizens. We're not importing voters. We're not importing, you know, long-term residents, because it's a privilege to come here, not a right. And so they, you know, come in, and we want them to come in then in reasonable numbers. And to, you know, so you know, you may have enough, I don't know, you know, obviously somebody who works remotely, it doesn't really matter so much, and you could even work remotely in India for jobs in America, if you will, programming or something. You don't have to sit in America to program a program, you know, or an app or whatever you want to call it, that's going to be used in America. You don't have to physically be here, so you don't have to come through the H-1B process. Just to, you know, work for an American corporation producing it, you know, programming something. But come here and be an IT worker that maintains servers locally, meaning physically, you know, touch things, you do need to be here. So so now with that, you will definitely want to hire Americans first, because probably a lot of these people are, you know, running along the lines of, they're probably making more than $100,000 a year anyways. And if you, you know, and if you just can't find enough, well, then you bring some in. Now, so I fully support this, and $100,000 is the number, sounds good. Now, we may find in 2 or 3 years, all the Americans who have programming skills of a real decent amount and are willing to properly work, I mean, actually do work, not just, you know, be purple-haired people getting into a company and then starting to protest things, that we run out of them, and we may find that $100,000 is too much, and we may reduce it to $50,000 or $75,000 a year annually, so that it's like, oh, hey, yeah, you know, we hire, you know, just use the name Singh. That's a common name, I think. We hire some guy named Singh in India for whatever amount, plus pay the fees to the government, because we can't get enough people in America, and then I'm fine with that. But I don't want to be hiring somebody named Singh coming from India, taking away an American job. You know, that an American was wanting to do it, but wanting to get $50,000 more a year. They wanted $100,000. Somebody from India was willing to do it for $50,000. Now with this thing, it's more expensive to bring in the Indians. So that's my take on it. Okay. Yeah, they were quite close to Moscow at one point. Definitely holiday punch. Well, the problem here is overpopulation, and the Indian government's trying hard to create jobs. Yeah. Seeing India is, I would consider it a mess. And it's complicated to fix India. I don't know how to do it. I wouldn't even know how to start. Many countries have that problem, but Indians are especially well connected in the U.S. Yes, they are. Well, the other thing is that the service that the government provides, I agree, the government takes more taxes than India, but the service that they put. Yeah, and so, it's, like I say, it's a complicated issue. Okay. What we're going to do is swap these two out. And I'm going to reinforce this to 7. And now it's infantry dug in instead of cavalry, which will do better on the defensive, I do believe. This way. Okay, he has 4 action points, 10 strength. He is a core, so we're going to move right to here. We're going to entrench. These guys are going to move to there. These guys are going to move up to there. Oh, now, well, I don't know if you believe me or not, but there will also have immigration problems here. People from Bangladesh or Pakistan come here. Well, how do I put this? We're facing some levels of population collapse. And I don't want to say the West, because it's also places like Japan and Korea. But I think it's a self-correcting problem, one. But it is going to, not so much my generation, but the next generation coming up, lead to a problem of lots and lots of old people and not a lot of younger people. But I don't know that, I'm the more people, the better. Now, we can talk about places like India or Africa that are overpopulated. Yes, I will agree that there are regions that are overpopulated, like Singh is saying. But in the more developed countries, the more people, the better. But I don't believe in just bringing in random people from other parts of the world to fill your population collapse. And, okay. And I know Lum, who probably isn't watching, but I'll get back to what Singh is saying in just a moment. That I'm ranting and not playing, and some people can do both. Yeah. Malthus was wrong. Now, Malthus is right in that if you have a population boom, and partially some of that population boom was starting to happen because of better medicines and whatnot, but only just starting to. You have a population boom, but you don't have corresponding technological developments. And we have seen corresponding technological developments. Now, that may not be forever and ever, but The only real limitation for humanity right now is to its population size is energy. If we have enough energy, we can build high-rise farms because we can, have a 100-story farm that has, we have cheap or free energy. It has lighting that will grow. We don't need to cover the surface with farms if we want to densely pack our farms and build buildings that will last for a few generations. That structurally, so you have the cost of the building, but that'll last for a few generations before you need to tear it down and replace it. And if you have the energy to run it, you can have farms going into the sky. And with our current technology, it's not, except for the energy situation, it's not beyond what we can do right now. So Malthus is wrong, very much so. And Japan is looking at all these robotics to help old people and whatnot. But so much of the jobs that, how do I put this, that need less human attention. I'm living up in my secret mountain base, and I'm still getting a lot of deliveries. Now, when I'm in LA, I can get same day, within a few hours, delivery for a bunch of stuff from Amazon. And not just food coming from, Sprouts or whatever they have partnered with. But but stuff from the warehouse, I can get it the same day. Now, up here in my secret mountain base, it normally takes 2 days minimum to get whatever I order on Amazon. But from the local grocery store, I can get deliveries here within a few hours. And when I was sick, I was having some of that done. I'm now doing much, much better, taking medicines and whatnot. And I'm out and about, and I actually try to figure out things to go do just to get out of the house. So I'm no longer using the service, but it was fairly cheap. And unlike because back in the 70s and the 60s and the 50s, there used to be a lot more home delivery of groceries, especially in more urban areas in the East. But you had to either call the grocery store up and say, I want some eggs and I want this and I want that, and somebody has to sit down and write it down, or you have to go in and make a standardized order. But no, they would phone call it in, and then somebody take it down and then fill out go fill the bags and then deliver the groceries, etc. Well, now I was able to, and I know, hey, Beam Slam, I know some people are going, well, of course we know all this, gamer. Yeah, I know, but not everybody knows this. I was able to put in my order on my computer, and then the person that was fulfilling it would have on their cell phone, would have the order, and I could even make notes. And if there was something like missing or whatever, they could talk to me about a replacement thing, and I could approve a replacement item real time. And then they would deliver it to me within a short amount of time. And so because of all that technology, you're able to do, there's still a human going around the grocery store picking up the food and then taking it to a car and delivering it to me, yes. But the amount and that person was often fulfilling more than one order at a time, the amount of humans needing to, human friction, if you will, to get that job done is incredibly reduced. So your work output, because of the technology, can be much greater. So you get more deliveries per day out of the same person being, paid and whatnot. So I think population collapse is real. I think it will be correcting, though there may be years in the next 50 years or so in which it's a bit of a crisis in places. But I don't see it as and this is what Singh gets me into, as meaning societal collapse. And because most of this is happening in the Western world, if we're smart about it, we won't be overrun by the barbarians. Because we also have that technology to defend ourselves. Thousands of Indians or Nigerians marching towards Europe, even armed with AK-47s, are just going to be so many targets at some point if we're willing to defend ourselves. So, overpopulated regions won't necessarily be able to conquer underpopulated regions. Australia is physically underpopulated, but it's overpopulated in people versus the amount of water. They have a severe water problem there. Australia is a very dry place. But Australia is, an island, so they can defend themselves from invasion, including from their northern neighbor, Indonesia, which has huge populations. Now, they got huge amounts of water in Indonesia, so they can support it. But if Indonesia wanted, say, the resources, minerals and whatnot, in Australia, and thinking that it would just send down, I'm not saying like rowboats when I'm saying boats. I'm saying, Higgins boats and other sort of ferries or whatever that they build, and trying to invade Australia, Australia can have the technology to sink these things. So it's not that big of an issue. Okay. Arrested for printing Pakistani currencies and having connection pass. Okay. Beam slam, yes. Main cause of overpopulation here is that the north of India is less literate compared to the south. Indian people in the south are more educated. There is a correlation that may be causation between the higher educated you are, the less child rates, the less children you have. That may be a causation, but there's definitely a correlation, if you understand the distinction I'm making there. But also it's coming from not just education, but coming from the idea that more children means more better income, because if you're an agrarian society and you're producing food enough for your family, and then you're producing extra food to sell, more children help you produce that food. Or if you are doing, which still very much do, I believe, in India, doing labor-intensive industrial output. I see some videos, I think mostly coming from Pakistan, about them making ammunition and putting in boxes that they're having printed up that look like it's coming from Europe. I wouldn't trust any of that ammunition. How they're loading the powder into the shells for the 9mm. They're not measuring it, folks. They're just sort of pouring it over, leveling it off, and then putting the bullet in. So that's scary ammunition. And so the level of humans versus per bullet they're making, or whatever it is, in a lot of these places, more family workers, better. But once you get to an educated society, your children are no longer economic benefits, they're economic liabilities. So a lot of people want to reduce that, especially because if they want to pay through college kind of education. Now what they're finding out after doing this for so many years, they're getting old and they only have 1 or 2 children, and it's a real thing. 1 or 2 children trying to take care of elderly parents, even with because I went through this as an only child, and my mother, even with help, meaning either visiting or live-in assistance, can be very taxing on you, to a point that it's a full-time job. And you can say, well, I didn't sign up for this, and well, you did by being born. Yeah, but if you have 4 children and they're living in proximity, in America that isn't necessarily, because often people live in multiple states, children move around. But if they're living in proximity to you, living in the same city or whatever, 4 children, and yes, you have parents, potentially, husband and wife on both sides, but you have 4 children, they can share the burden of, and it's not necessarily, full-time, feeding, spooning food into their mouth kind of thing or something like that. But, taking care of their elderly parents, it's not a full-time job. And so I think to a point, and this may happen in India, that having not huge amounts of children, but having, for a couple, two people, having 2 to 3 children, if everyone lives to adulthood is, sort of minimum replacement rate. But, having 2 or 3 children will mean the burden on them when you get older will be less. And it doesn't even necessarily need to be a financial burden. It can be because the boomers in America, they mostly had the financial wherewithal, and it wasn't, asking for financial assistance from their children. It was just assistance. So, yeah, it's that kind of thing. I don't know the from India thing, but okay. Right, now back to the game. Now here we are not dug in, and we've moved back here. So these guys are going to dig in. Always go to 3 sides because you may be flanked. These guys are going to come up here and dig in. And these guys are going to dig in about like that. Okay, so go to infantry weapons. 2. Now we're dug in again. They've got to come out to where it's maybe less supplied. We're on supply lines there. Okay, now here, should be able to swap these out. You still can't get better. Creep back to get reinforced. These guys reinforcement since they can. Grind them down a little bit more. So it looks like this lack of stacking here gets. Hey, ZZ. Good to see you again as well. Tell you one thing, and it's laughing and serious thing at the same time. My state chief minister, like you have a governor, right there, man, his qualifications is just 10th pass. I'm presuming you mean 10th grade and passed. Yeah, well, I think hey, it looks like it may be raining out here. I don't know. I don't know. Education levels. I have to agree with a lot of people that say you will expect it from a country whose leader is less educated. I think education levels are overrated. We're seeing this in America a lot. Distrust of the elite educated, because how do I put this? We are being ruled, at least governed, but I would sort of say ruled, by people who think they know what they're doing, but don't. And they justify it often by their education levels. a lot of people's education levels are, get them isolated. They may know what their education vertical, their education, element thinks that it knows, and are very trusting that it's correct. But that's presuming their education has it correct, and they're trusting in that, and they haven't done anything. So it's like somebody who goes and studies economies in school and then is trying to say how you run businesses and setting up tax policies and all this stuff, when they haven't never run a business and they don't understand that all these laws that they're passing, even if they're good laws, are burdensome and cost huge amounts of, in essence, money, but efficiency and other things. And so if it sounds good, we do it. When they've never, run a company, they've never tried to function. So, we are being run by the overeducated who don't realize that they're overeducated and that they don't necessarily have better answers. So, it depends on who the person is and what they're doing and why would they need a better education. I don't know that they would. It's the question, are they doing a good job or not? Okay, bye-bye. Now, what we're going to do here is, see, I think you're dug in. Yes, we came around the back of that. But it cost them the core that came around the back. Okay, now, that is just a detachment. And it's a core and also core. So we're going to see what we can do here. There we go. Now, we can't move in and dig in, unfortunately. So we won't. Most policymakers are lawyers. They don't have education necessary to understand how economies work. Exactly, folk. Yeah, that's the kind of thing. It's not, I want stupid people, but yeah, I think, in America, at least, everyone should be a proper high school graduate. Everyone should. But if you made it through high school and then you've had, 10 to 20 years doing things and then run for office or something, hey, I think that'd be great. I mean, I wouldn't just because, somebody who went to college, I wouldn't vote for them over that if I liked their policies and et cetera. You know what I mean? It's somewhat dependent upon what I think they're doing, in office. Okay, you're just, oh no, you are a core. Okay, well then we'll reinforce you. Dug in. No, you're not properly dug in. So let's rotate the trench lines from what it was when we captured. You dug in. Let's move you down there. So next turn. All right. Okay, I think we're doing pretty well here. I mean, it's not huge chunks of the Russia taken, but we are pushing into Russia, which I think is good. Now, out here. Okay, we have 5 shells, so let's bombard the French corps here. Them first. You guys will swap out, so we'll have a stronger front line here. Now here, okay, before I do any more, we lose a fighter. I think we did. Let's look at purchasing for Germany. Yeah, we need to rebuild this fighter range so that it's. I wish this would stay set. I think I built my last. No way, I think I did. A little closer up to here. Right, okay. Now, the better shaped unit. Move up. Very strategic war in the Pacific that was released. No, I've not played that. ZZ, the Pacific War. One, I just haven't had the opportunity, and I don't know how well it translates. You know, I really like Strategic Command. But I don't know how well this turn-based game will do the Pacific. I guess I haven't watched any real playthroughs. I've seen bits and pieces, but not really enough to know. And like I say, I love some of the, sort of daily campaign versions of this game. I think it's really good. But some of the stuff, I don't know. It's just okay. You can future weapons. You can't upgrade somebody on the front line in touch with the enemy. So you can upgrade the stuff in the. You don't want to just use the upgrade tool, because if you don't want to upgrade mobility, which does cost, you want to be a little more careful about that. They're just mobility. Yeah, I'm not moving the cores around enough. Recently, my dad got into a fight with the local bureaucrats. They're responsible for governing education. Yeah, I'm sure that is. It can be quite a problem at times with dealing with bureaucrats. I want to buy and try it sometimes. Saw some reviews, liked it, but said the naval didn't translate well into the big impact for replacing that theater, obviously. Yeah, see, that's part of the thing here is I can't concentrate this Navy. I can individually hammer an opposing force, but it's, there's not, I can't even put all these people in, all these ships into ports. You can't put them all into one port. There isn't that sort of coordinated naval aspect, and especially by the time you're getting into World War II, how much a carrier, if you had a battleship group with a bunch of destroyers and cruisers, how much more protected it is from all kinds of attack if you just have one carrier with it. For, same thing with or without a carrier. As well as potentially, and the Italians did this a little better because they didn't have carriers, but they had, islands and bases everywhere. Air coverage. Now, it wasn't maybe as persistent as a carrier would have been with the force, but, so it doesn't, you don't have all of that opportunity. So I really sort of kind of wonder about that. I'm not saying you shouldn't get it, ZZ, but that's sort of the thing for me is, does it replicate the theater well? And, I'll tell you right now, if I was commissioned by Slytherin to play it on their channel, I'd love to play it, and check it out and see how it is. I mean, it's not like I would be reluctant to play it, not at all. But it's, like I say, it's, how well will it do its job and whatnot. So since it was what I expected, we'll probably wait for a discount. Yes, discounts are always good. There are sales. Warplane does a better job. Absolutely, Beam Slam. That's what I mean. I've voice chatted, shall we say, with both the people that Bill and whatnot that because I forget who exactly I talked to, as well as text chatted and whatever with the team that puts out Strategic Command, as well as Alvaro, who who was the single developer, at least originally, with Warplan. So I know these guys. I mean, they're not like good friends or anything, but I know these guys that have made these games. So it's I'm friendly with them, so it may seem a little hard to criticize, but the Strategic Command people believe that just pure stacking is hard for people to manage. I don't know whether it's truly an engine limitation or if they truly just believe that, because and I totally agree with I don't want doom stacks. But the idea that this railway artillery piece can't also occupy the same hex as this core, and these air units can't occupy the same hex as this core. I have 2 air units and the railway gun along with whatever's in this core here. That should be very doable. Okay, I don't, and the HQs, again, you don't want them on the front line and they're whatever, but that so that if I could stack the HQs and stack the artillery here, I sort of kind of think it should be able to stack too. But if you're able to take all these stack stuff or all these large units, and be able to stack them, I'd get rid of a lot of the traffic jam problems. Now in Warplan, for ground units, these kind of things, you do have a de facto stacking. You don't get to actually stack, but you can say add artillery or something like that to a unit, meaning you're adding more than standard artillery to the core or whatever. And so that is de facto giving it sort of this. I mean, you don't get to launch bombardments, but you have a core with additional artillery or whatever. So you can add some, I don't know, capabilities or whatever to the ground units. So they are in effect sort of stacking specialized units into standard units. So yeah, I like the way Warplan does it better and that kind of thing. I felt the American Civil War didn't translate well, in my opinion. Waited a while for that one before buying. Yeah, and I agree with that too, in that I've enjoyed my Civil War and other, especially some of the Mexican playthroughs. But you never really get the sense of what was in Civil War the idea of a doom stack. You build up that army. You very well may have, along, Northern Virginia and Maryland sort of front lines or whatever. And you can especially see, at least I know this well, from the first Battle of Manassas or Bull Run or whatever you want to call it, that battle, because I've played it out several times, very much has both Confederate and Union forces arriving at different times. So it was not on either side a concentrated force pushing, but it was concentrating. That sort of kind of could be like these different, several units attacking the same unit here, but it's this one unit that's isolated and you can't bring in reinforcements. So the idea of the big battle was, like I say, they very well, and at times, Jackson is spreading out some of his troops, partially just to feed them better. But the idea that you quickly bring them together as a coherent force and attack another coherent force that has its supporting elements and its full size, and it's not like three counters, whatever size the unit may be, attacking one. It's able to do it better. So I think they did that. When's the next Hoi for War Thunder? War Thunder will probably be tomorrow. Hoi 4, I don't know when I'm going to play it. I have no current plans on playing it. Not that I'm not going to play it, but I don't have any getting ready to play it kind of things. Relatively strong. Okay, well, the Austrians do not have a mobility option. Okay, so I can more easily come in here for Austria. And just use the tool here to get these upgraded, the ones now. The Germany I gotta watch. Upgrade Austrians that are facing the front line. Yeah, there, down here, we have huge amounts. So we'll have to rotate units out of the front lines to be able to upgrade them. Okay, have a good evening, Sing. Thanks for hanging out with us. Okay, so they will do better there. Forces here just yet. Yeah. It does not have unlimited effectively at the moment. So I do think these units all along the front line here Can't upgrade. I like how they go from a pickle hoob to a stall helm to a camouflaged painted stall helm. That's sort of cool. New unit, German. I think we want this on the western front. And Austria. Let's go there. Maybe you'll shoot at some of the Zeppelins, blimps, or whatever. You guys. You. Okay. Just have a smattering of troops along the front lines to encourage Romania to stay neutral. I think that's okay. Germany is out of points. Austria has plenty of points, but out of units it can build. And I think we're not going to build anything for the Turks. Yeah, fortunately, I'm having a little trouble reading the dots here on my laptop. Your laptop is pretty damn decent, but still, it's just a little bit sometimes not as clear as it could be. I wish I could zoom larger screen, see better a little bit. But yeah, I like these counters. Okay, I'm going to save this. Not ready to give the Entente turn because I have to deal with the Navy here. But we got so far, I don't want to stupid mistakes. Now we sort of know a clear path out. We just have to draw the line. You guys. Sorry for all the pinging. There we go. They're heading out to sea. They're upgraded U-boats. Okay. Run away, run away. You little bit. I normally don't bother with bombs. They hardly have any damage rating for bombing, but they can be used for reconnaissance, so that's nice. The Zeppelins. I think I've now done enough, and we'll let the Entente have their turn. Uh-oh. The Balfour Declaration published promising a homeland for the Jewish people. Austro-Hungarian develops mobility level 1, so now we have to be careful. One, I mean, I want it, but it just makes it more tedium work. Well, maybe they have the MPP to do both. I don't know. We'll see. Now, why did the AI move a fighter unit to the front line? What? Plug the gap? What? What? Got to go after their sub there. Oh, I forgot to put mines out. Damn. Well. Have you seen the old version, which been released on Steam, updated to modern widescreens? No, not specifically, but yeah. It loses one MPP, and it's or the interceptor shooting down some of the stuff. I don't know that it isn't counterproductive. But these guys took a big hit. We're gonna reinforce them. Hello, the new IKB. Good to have you here, my friend. How have you been? Thank you, IKB, and good to hear that you're doing well. Yes, they do look depleted, and I'm cautiously getting ready to advance on the Western Front here. Though I do see some British tanks showing up, which may be that I'm not going to advance. I think I've been doing a very good strategy of attritional warfare against them in the West and other places, but definitely in the West. And the Russians even got tanks. Wow. The Germans don't yet. We have some in production, but we don't have them. Fighting breaks out in Petrograd. Russian government loses control as disorder breaks out. Tsar Nicholas II abdicates and a provisional government is formed. Alexander Kerensky becomes Minister of War in the new Russian government. Leon Trotsky returns to Russia from exile. Kerensky appointment boosts Russian national morale. Right. And okay, this is 18. Now let's save this here. Okay. D17, the Battle of Passchendaele, yes, about the bonsai charge. Lenin should be helpful in the war effort for Germany, yes. I want to speak a little bit on this. With the big caveat, I've watched documentaries. I've watched the TV series Riley of Ace of Spies. It's very good, starring Sam Neill. And a few other things that deal with Russia around this time, World War I. Oh, I've seen Dr. Zhivago, so I know a little bit, I know I'm quoting Hollywood movies, a Russian being played by an Arab, they didn't, having different ethnic groups play people isn't just a new thing. I mean, he does a great job of it, but I don't know to a Russian if he looks very Russian, shall we say that. Yeah, let's just obliterate the unit. Okay, and they can move in, but do we want to move in? We'll think about that for a moment. With the fall of the Tsarist government, why did the Kerensky government want to continue the war with Germany? Now, I want to clearly say war isn't always a choice, okay? The other side may just attack you. You don't have a choice. And really coming out, there's stuff before World War I, but really coming out of World War I is the peace movements that, in my opinion, are dangerous. I get the waste of all the lives in World War I and why people just go, let's just have peace. Let's be pacifists. Let's just peace. If everyone just agreed that peace was the thing, well, then we would all be at peace. Well, humanity is nowhere near that point, even in the developed world. Because we could see a very pro-war. We're sort of terrified of some of the consequences of some of what's going on, but the very pro-war, National Socialist movement coming in Germany after World War I, Hitler and the guys, and getting voted into office, that And they were very open about the idea of wanting wars to happen. That we can see that humanity isn't just going to peace because we pass out some flowers. So you don't always get the choice. But obviously, Germany signs the Brest-Litovsk treaty with the Soviets, or the Bolsheviks, I should say, eventually. Why did the Russians not, Kerensky's government or whoever whatever you want to, did not pursue serious peace agreements? Oh, Germany wanted too much, probably. Basically Brest-Litovsk. We haven't really lost, but come on, we've seen that the Russians have lost the war. They aren't, continuing the war is not a real viable solution. So I just don't get why they don't, why they don't peace out. Okay, you're going to probably lose Ukraine, you're going to lose Belarus, and you're going to lose what becomes the Baltic states or whatever. Well, that should just set you up like we see in France after the Franco-Prussian War, like we see in Germany after World War I. A potential for a national unity campaign to regain lost territories, meaning not necessarily, in 1925 or 1935 or whatever, Russia's going to go to war with Germany to retake its lost territories. No, it might do that, but before that happens, it would be an excuse, a reason, however you want to say it, for not as brutal as Stalin was, but a serious industrial push in Russia. A serious, why do we need to put up with all these hardships? Well, because we lost so much territory, and we're afraid the Germans may attack again, and we want our territory back, so we have to build up industry to be able to have a more modern army. And then the people will put up with deprivations of various types and not just turn to the communists because they have a reason for it. They're rebuilding their national whatever, their national focus, their national capabilities, and all of that. So sometimes losing can be better than winning. Depends on what does winning look like and what does losing look like. But I just don't get the whole why they continued to once the collapse of the government should have been able to dump all the blame for all the lost territories, for all the lost whatever, lives, money, whatever, on the previous government. And so we're blameless for all of that, our new government, and we're going to rebuild Russia. But I don't know why, because and I will accept, from somebody who really knows what's going on. I don't. This is why this is a big question for me. I will accept from their bubble they couldn't see any alternatives because it was just the way things were. Yeah, if you know what I mean. Of course we're gonna, continue the war because it's the only thing they understood. If that's truly the case, and that would take enough of a psychological study of the leadership elements, not just one person, but the leadership elements, I could buy it. But I would think from all real appearances, that Russia just does not have the ability to face off against Germany and be successful. That's sort of how I'm looking at it. Okay. No, it's the core. Okay. You retreat all the way back to there. You come up here and attack. And you retreated back to there, and then you can't go anywhere. Okay. Now here. You can out here and reinforce. You can't upgrade. Yeah, we're gonna have to upgrade these guys before we try more offensives. I want to push, but I don't want to do what the Russians are doing here and that they're over pushing. From brief reading, the government agreed to a successful military offensive was required to unite the people and restore morale to the Russian army. Yeah, but why do they think they could get a successful offensive? Yeah. Okay, we're going to push into here. We're going to, instead of, that would be a very juicy attack, of course, but instead of that, we are going to occupy there. Here. These guys are going to come up here. And so maybe it's just too much bubble thinking. You know, they're in a bubble. They don't have a better idea. Upgrade. These guys are still in pickle hoops. Oh no, they're mountain troops. Never mind. They're not in pickle hoops. They're in mountain caps. Hmm. You guys put the Germans there. Reinforce. And yes, sometimes winning is just not losing. Right, well, now back over here. All of the rear unit. Upgraded where we can. Need to, whatever, but yeah. Uh-oh, I pushed the wrong button. I got obnoxious Frenchmanism. Well, a little tedious, yes, I know, going through all these and seeing which ones can or should be upgraded. Oh, keep pushing it if you're talking the front line. Well, I think I need to upgrade my forces first. I think I can make it to here. Yep. Well, save this. And down here, first we will reinforce these very weak units. You back here. There we go. Breaking out. You guys go back to shipping rolls instead of hiding rolls. And we have this guy here. Russian sub. We have not been doing well in upgrading our anti-submarine warfare skills. And technologies and all of that good stuff. Okay. Another destroyer. Yes, we're running away from a Russian sub. The French button, yeah. Come over here. Let's go Paris. We get that. What? Okay. Detachment. That's going into the east because we are expanding out, and we want to move you up to there. Forces here, and our core we want here in the west. And for the Turks. Okay, well, there we go. One to move into this mess, the other one to come down here. Germany, well, we can get another detachment. Let's do that. Austria, nothing we can get. The Turks, well, now the Turks we can get. All right, well, looks good. Okay, Chief of General Staff, the revolution in Russia and the setting up a provisional government there opens up a new opportunity to weaken our opponents in the East. There is a Russian revolutionary in Switzerland called Lenin who could provide useful if we were to arrange for him to be sent to Russia, where he will be able to agitate in favor of the Bolshevik Party. Would you like to authorize 25 MPP to send him to Russia in the hopes that he will be able to provoke further disorder? Okay, now, not for the Russian people. Let's discard good or bad for the Russian people and focus mainly on the German people, but other people as well, too, outside of Russia. Would it have been better to have not sent Lenin in the long run? Now, of course, we don't know, sitting here in 1917, we don't know what the future is going to bring, because he could go to there, and he and his Bolsheviks could run around for a little while and then get caught in firing squads. You know, we don't, it isn't a sure thing that the Bolsheviks are then going to take over. Now, of course, looking back at it, we know that they will. But would it have been better to go, this is just dangerous, playing with fire? These ideas of communism are still plaguing us today, and it's evil. Communism is evil. Not just that they do evil to achieve their goals, killing millions of people to bring about communism, but even if you brought about communism peacefully, it is an evil system by its design. It is leveling, and it's sort of some of the ultimate leveling, is evil, meaning everybody needs equal outcomes, even if it isn't communistical in the sense that people could own their own farm or their own small business or whatever, or shares in a business or a farm or whatever, and still have markets, operating out in the economies, but just with the idea that no one's going to be too rich, no one, and the poor people there's no one going to be too poor. Not everybody's 100%, the same. Somebody's farm is going to be a little better than somebody else's farm or whatever, sure, but you're not going to allow the idea of whether they're titled as a lord or just simply a boss that has huge amounts of farmland. I'm not talking big agricorps like we have today, but just somebody who owns farmland who just sits there and oversees 100 workers on their farm or something. That is unallowed. It's always bad. But do you think the world would have been, or Germany would have been better without the Russian Revolution, or the second part of the Russian Revolution? So far, no one's taking me up on this. Okay, we're going to be short-sighted, of course, and do this. Explosion in Halifax causes thousands of casualties. German agents blamed for the Halifax explosion. Progress on infantry warfare for the Austrians. Austro-Hungary develops armored warfare level 2. Scientists progress on aerial warfare. Good. The Germans were playing with fire when they started the war. You can't control war. You can't ride the tiger. Don't get on the beast. Well, I don't see Germany as starting World War I. World War II, I'll grant you for sure. Oh, I forgot to move these guys. Oh, well. Well, I mean, Beamslam, even the ideal communism. I agree with you whether it's successful, and it's not even that it doesn't work at a large scale. And I want to say this here. I distinctly have two different things. One is communism. The other is communalism, meaning a commune that's a group of people, let's say 300 people that share could be a farm, could be a business. They, own individual shares in the, into the business that could function inside of a capitalistic economy overall for the country. It's just this commune here, this commune there, and not all businesses or things need to be communes. But the idea that with oh shit, okay, I'm going to have to go back to the save. I forgot to deal with that in there. That's a forgetful thing. I'm going to have to go back to that. Okay, well. Probably the got it because we'll see how it goes. But I forgot to deal with the Sinai front. But the idea of, to me, it's pure evil that you're limiting the scope of human endeavors, that you are allowing or requiring or forcing humans to, yeah, I forgot to do a bunch down here. Uh, they're full, yeah, like an Israeli kibbutz where it's quite successful. Yes, that's a communal thing. That is a group of people, and you can see who's working and who's not working. Are they not working because, yeah, I got a lot of work to do down here. Because they're old or they're injured or they're just lazy. Or maybe they don't have the skills for this job. You need to move them to some other job within the kibbutz or the commune or something like that. That is different. I don't want to live that way. And I've talked to some people. They often like the American Indians tribes that they had private property, not land. Well, it depends on where you go. What tribes? North American tribes vary all kinds of different ways, but they definitely they had rich people, and within their tribe, relatively rich people. But the rich person was expected to take care. In essence, sort of demanded that if somebody didn't have enough blankets or enough food for the winter, they had to give up some of their stuff for the good of the community, the tribe. Yeah, I will grant when you're looking at that kind of society that is good, not just an acceptable evil, but an actual good. But communism, as expressed by Marx, Engels, Lenin, Mao, etc., is at its heart that it's evil because knowing what they knew and not the idea that somebody can become successful through their own endeavors it's just evil at its core. Yeah, I'm gonna fix this crap here. These are some of the reasons I reload on this game, is I forget to do a front or forget to do a thing. It's not the die roll, because because I'm going to swap out the two cores. If they succeeded against the core that was in good shape, they succeeded against the core that was in good shape. But forgetting to either reinforce the bad core or swap it out. Now, if I don't have the points or something, that's a different matter. But so yeah, so to me, and it's a little hard to say why I think. Yeah, trying to distill it down, but the idea that you're forcing people to the lowest common denominator and not allowing for people to have success in life, to have full expression of their faculties, their ability to think, reason, you do, craftsmanship. Somebody becomes a millionaire, a billionaire because they're a painter. Somebody's making these wonderful paintings and somebody's willing to pay them big money for it. And they can, buy a Rolls Royce and whatever else. And limiting them from being able to do that, I think, is evil. No, you can be a painter, but you have to, however good or bad you are, however much potentially your paintings are in demand, you have to make the same amount as somebody who works in the field somewhere. That is what I find to be evil with communism. So Finland declares independence from Russia. Forced to vote again in a second referendum. Australia again rejects conscription. Now, well, we're going to go back anyways, but I'll still save it. here at the beginning here. Sometimes people don't know their own history, even people who claim to be historians or historically knowledgeable. The one YouTube and other sort of site, Podcast of the Lotus Eaters, these are started by Sargon of Akkad or whatever. I'm forgetting his real name right now. They were doing this one thing and talking about how Britain didn't have conscription and until World War I, and they blah blah blah, and the tradition of the history of Britain, blah 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 blah. And I'm sitting here as an American going, are you fucking that ignorant? Carl Benjamin, yes, thanks, folk. And I don't think it was him, but I think it was some of the other minions there that, supposedly had studied up on the subject. They were talking about whether for some of these wars, if they were to introduce conscription, would the British people fight, in Afghanistan or just national survival or whatever. No, people wouldn't, blah, 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 blah. Britain's had conscription for a long time. Britain's historically had conscription because the whole feudal system has a conscription element built into it. You were expected not just to be a farmer, but became sort of a tradition in England and Wales and whatnot to practice the longbow, but to, spears and shields and whatnot, peasants fighting with arms, and not just peasants with pitchforks, but peasants training up a bit to being that. So they've had conscription way back in the Middle Ages and into the Renaissance. And now if you're looking at the 17th century, you had various conscriptions for the English Civil War. Maybe not national conscriptions, but conscriptions. And if you're looking at the 18th century, Britain had hell of a conscription. Their navy was conscripted. It was called the press gangs, and theoretically it was only supposed to press seamen, though that wasn't truly limited to those. A lot of people in coastal regions got pressed too. So they had the press. Now they just didn't have a well-organized, everybody needs to put their name on a list of paper, lists, and people get called up in an orderly manner. It was more of just, who can you go out and catch and bring into the Navy, or stop a ship and take half of its crew. So they've had conscription. Now, though, in the 18th century, up until World War I, which is the end of the 19th century, Britain did not have military conscription for the army. They had naval conscription. So that is a new thing. And so that did sort of kind of rankle the English people. And part of that is, and it's fairly clear at the time, now people's attitudes have changed, but to defend England, to defend Canada, to defend Australia, you don't need military conscription. The people in large enough numbers will volunteer for the army, to what it needs to defend. But what they were very willing to accept is that you may need to, where the proper, other than Canada here in my three examples, because you're looking at the United States being on the border. The other examples, the real defense of Britain and Australia is the Navy. So that, Germany here cannot defeat Britain in any way, shape, or form unless it can defeat the British Navy. And whether it's submarines and cutting off supplies, or, the big, the one big battle of Jutland, or other sort of ideas of a major, surface confrontation out there fighting. But if you can't, if the British can control the seaways, Germany or France or Russia or whoever cannot defeat Britain, take Britain. And that is true for Australia and some of these other places. And there's definitely seen within the British and Commonwealth attitudes that there are colonies like Canada and Australia that are, in essence, British colonies. And then there are overlordship, rulership, whatever, governorship of large scales of other peoples, like Africa or India or whatever. Those are expeditions. Those are nice to haves, but not required to haves. Meaning, if we were to, if you look from British perspective, if we were to lose some African colonies, well, that's a bad thing, but it's not, Britain being conquered. So there is definitely an idea that military or army conscription is, how shall I say this, is at this time is a luxury for the government, not a requirement for national defense. Now, move into the second half of the 20th century. And we can particularly look at World War II, but we can look at other places as well. That national conscription, even, I'm thinking, volunteerism may not be large enough to defend true national interest, because yes, as it stands now, the U.S. is unconquerable. No one can conquer. I mean, if all the rest of the planet ganged up on the U.S., they cannot conquer the U.S. They could destroy it. I want to say this very clearly. They can destroy it in theory, maybe in practice, by sending enough nuclear bombs or whatever, and whatever our various anti-missile defenses get overwhelmed. They could destroy us, yes, but conquer us, meaning send in soldiers, no. It is undoable for the foreseeable future. Now, 100, 200 years in the future, that may be a very, very different thing. But right now, for the foreseeable future, the U.S. is unconquerable. But I look at the Cold War and think, even without nuclear weapons, the U.S. would be in a pretty bad position if just about everywhere else, if Canada, if there was one hostile, okay, IKB, you have a good day at work. If one hostile division, non-Canadian division gets moved into Canada, that would trigger a U.S. invasion. We can, and Beam Slam and I talked about this a bit with Trump in the early days in office. Trump and America was never going to invade Canada, never invade Greenland. The only reason that sort of came up with Canada was because Trudeau, I think it was before actually Trump even becomes president, comes down and has a meeting with, or an impromptu meeting with Trump at Mar-a-Lago and goes, hey, if you put all these tariffs on it, you're going to destroy Canada. And Trump's going, if Canada can't exist without America propping it up through, benefits and trade, then Canada doesn't deserve to exist as a country. Now, Canada probably can survive if the U.S. 100%, and it would hurt the U.S. too, but 100% close the border with Canada because it does have sea lanes. It can probably, go through some tough years and figure things out, and survive as a country. And I'm not talking, just as a, from military threats. I'm talking as an economic, political, whatever force. And so that was just Trudeau saying something stupid and Trump going, well, if it's dependent upon the U.S., then it doesn't deserve. And I would agree. If it truly is dependent upon the U.S., then Canada does not exist or does not deserve to exist as an independent country. It should be, if it's depending on the U.S., it should just be part of the U.S. I think that if it can do it on its own, well, then that's fine. It can do it on its own. And Greenland, it was very much, hey, you want to expand your bases or whatever, you should pay more money to Denmark, and we're going, or whatever, or to, the Greenland, we're going, hey, we think this is a strategic national interest of the United States. The Arctic oceans are opening up. We're seeing even China sending ships through the Arctic oceans, naval vessels, we need better defenses up there. If you can't defend it well enough, Denmark, maybe we should absorb it into the U.S. and whatnot. And there's good reason. That doesn't mean we should invade. That just means you better either step up and militarize it, and maybe pay the U.S. to militarize it or whatever, as opposed to the other way around. And there is a national interest. The one thing that hello, Ray Gun Rob, I'll get to your chat in a minute. One thing that I don't know if it's going to happen, and I do know that there's been some I don't know exactly what, but I know it has behind the scenes stuff, is dealing with China involvement in the Panama Canal. And that would truly be a retaking. The Panama Canal was U.S. national territory. Panama was part of Colombia, and it was only the U.S. Navy showing up and protect, because even today it's very hard. But back then, in a practical sense, you could not get from the mainland of Colombia up to Panama without going via the sea. It was just too jungly, too mountainy, too rough. You had to move an army. So we established Panamanian independence because the locals sort of wanted it. And the price to pay for your independence was, oh, hey, we get the canal zone as national territory. So it was never part of Panama, as an independent nation. It was part of Colombia in the Panamanian region of Colombia, yes, but it was not part of Panama. So that would simply be retaking national territory. And I think, from everything that I've heard, the Panamanians have broken the treaty that gave them the territory, and that they were charging the U.S. Navy and the U.S. ships monies that they should not have been charging them to go through the Panama Canal as part of the agreement of access. They were not prioritizing U.S. access over other ships, meaning, my understanding, and I may be wrong. I'm very willing to be acknowledged if I am wrong. But my understanding was that U.S. flagged ships, whether they're Navy or civilian, always got preference in going through the canal. Not maybe jumping the line if everything's moving smoothly, but when the water levels were so low in, Lake Khatun or whatever, the sort of lake that's there. Oh, well, we can't move too much shipping through. And they were sort of auctioning it off to the highest bidder, to who got to go through and all that stuff, where it should have just been standard rate fees. You don't get to raise them for American vessels. And if you only get to have 10 ships going through a month and there's 10 American ships, it's going to be American ships. Nobody else gets to go through. That was my understanding of the agreement. Always American preference over any other flagged nations, and not able to raise fees beyond whatever, meaning you can't auction off for higher fees because limited access. So that, and they've allowed, we know that all major businesses in China are, function at the sufferance of the Chinese Communist Party, and they all have one level or another Chinese Communist influence, meaning people working in those companies that are put there by the Chinese Communist Party. So these large corporations that own ports and whatnot, either own or building, and the Chinese were or are building a large bridge across the canal that, I wonder how hard would it be that the Chinese, because we often see the Chinese build stuff that just falls down unintentionally, meaning this crappy building, but how hard would it be for them to set up a saboteur event when they so choose to collapse that bridge across the canal that would take months or a year or whatever to clear off the wreckage, just to disrupt American trade if they so wish to, even without declaring wars, let alone declaring wars. So I think they've allowed too much Chinese influence into it, which has broken the treaty. So since you break the treaty, we should be able to take the land back. And I would still, whether it takes a military, not conquering Panama. I mean, we went in and defeated their army back in just cause to get rid of Noriega. So we have a history of that. And so to go back and re-secure just the canal zone and put it back truly in American hands is not evil American aggressionism. It's just, we stupidly let you have American territory and you've broken your agreement on it. And so we get to take it back. So, Trump and whatnot. So, but one thing that would get a U.S. invasion of Canada would be what would be perceived as a hostile enemy division, whether it's Russian or whoever, going into Canada, like if Canada turns communist or something or whatever, a hostile division, that would trigger a U.S. invasion. But, had the world gone communist, except for the American, America, that would be bad for America. It really would. So the idea of conscription, even in peacetime, if you're not getting enough volunteers because changes in culture and whatnot, that people don't volunteer for the military in large enough numbers, I really think in a modern sense, because if you look at pre-World War One, and I'm looking at Britain, not because you can look at like Russia, they had to have a standing army, because if they didn't have a standing army, if it was just sitting there, nothing would happen. No, they had to have a standing army because they could be attacked from 2 or 3 sides at very, very short notice. But even if you look at Britain, and that's where we started all this, and conscription, Britain in the 18th century very much thought that, and it maintained its navy, that it could protect itself in peacetime and when a war outbreaks, and then they could, through volunteers, because they never wanted huge armies, but would be able to raise an army up. And Britain even stockpiled things like the lock on a brown musket. If you don't know, that's where you cock it back and whatnot. The complicated things, they stocked up in peacetime a bunch of those kind of things. And barrels, particularly locks and barrels, as just sort of semi-finished things. That then, once the war broke out, you'd pay for the finishing of the musket, which could be done much quicker, so that they could get enough muskets to arm their troops, and often also give or sell or give or whatever muskets to allied nations. So you had that cushion period of time to do it, to get your army ready to go. But in the modern complicated militaries, how quickly, and because I'm looking also at the Cold War and NATO, you don't have that time. And whether it's from Britain or the US or Australia's perspective, to have all of your allies, your other outposts, knocked off so rapidly that you're sort of stuck on your island is something that I think justifies conscription in the modern era. And so if the US can meet all of its targets, and for the Army, since Trump is meeting all of its target recruitment, including in the various specialty, combat roles, then hey, yeah, and we do have conscription in America. If hello, repeat 422 and ship commander, LOL. We do have conscription. You have to sign up for the selective service. Now, we're not actively conscripting people now, men only, but you have to sign up to be ready to be conscripted at the government's will. Okay, now I'll get to some of the chats. I always thought mandatory civil military service like 2 years would be a reasonable thing in the U.S. I didn't serve, but I think it would have. I think if I would have had to, I would have realized that it was a good career for me. Yeah, I am not really for required national military service for the U.S. unless there's an actual need for it. I understand a lot of civic virtues and duties, and like you say, you may have found that you really like the military, whether it's the... Now, you see, you may think that the Army, looking back on it, would have begun for you, but you may have been conscripted into the Navy. The Marine Corps is an all-volunteer force, or you might have been conscripted into the Air Force and not like it like you would have liked the Army or something. So it's not, you don't always get your choice on conscription there. Israel does have much more of a, military and other sort of required service. I definitely understand the benefits, and national service in this modern world would have to be both men and women equally. Now, national service doesn't always have to require that it's military service. And military service, you should, crawl through the mud if it's the army, and you should shoot your gun, but maybe you're a logistics person or something, women who non-combat roles. I mean, you train them just in case, oops, something happens and they get forced into combat. But so I'm not against training women in military capabilities, but I do not generally approve of women in combat roles unless it's absolutely necessary. And for America, it just isn't necessary. It's more of an ideological luxury. Now, that doesn't mean, like I say, they shouldn't serve in non-combat roles, and that sometimes non-combat roles get into combat because things don't go well. But I think a required national service is probably not good. But you can create a culture, and it takes what we call the media, and that includes internet media. We can create a culture where military service is highly prized as opposed to denigrated, and so that people will volunteer. Okay, yes, and I did say hello to repeat 422, but Ship Commander LOL asks, what should the U.S. do about Venezuela? Well, Venezuela, through its gangs, through its communism, through drug trades, and I say drug trade because I think the drugs are also grown in places and processed in places like Colombia and Brazil in the jungle and whatnot, and then get shipped into Venezuela, is a corrupt and possibly failed state. I have one of the memes that I talk about communism. It shows the same sort of little shopkeeper in that it's just it's not even a shop. Sort of like what you used to see like in train stations or whatever, like a newsstand, but a sort of a snack food stand or whatever, meaning you buy snack foods like on your way to work or way home or whatever. It's not even a store, just a single guy running a stall in a business. And it has him fat and the stall completely filled with stuff before the communists take over. Then some years later, you see the same guy, he tells the same guy, is now skinny and there's just sparse a few items on the shelves. So I look at that as, one of the many failures of communism. That could just simply also be stating the failures of centralized planning, but it's both communism and centralized planning. Should America invade Venezuela? No. There's no national interest for America to invade Venezuela. We need to protect, Guyana, I think. Next to it, it's one of the country immediately next to it. I think it was the former British colony, because there was French Guyana, which the French still own. Then there was the Dutch Guyana, which becomes Suriname, and then I think it's what had been British Guyana is there. They found They found oil offshore in the water, and Venezuela is trying to now claim that, half of what is Guyana territory should be Venezuela because blah, 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 and that would give them, Venezuela, the oil reserves that are out in the ocean. We need to protect Guyana. If I have the name right, I hope I do. That doesn't take more than a Marine brigade or a battalion or something potentially coming in there and destroying any sort of invasion force that Venezuela would send. As to the boats that we have attacked, we really don't know a lot about that, people. We really don't. I watch a YouTube channel, What's Up with Shipping or something like that. And he covers all kinds of shipping stuff. Started with that ship that got stuck in the Suez Canal, but he's continued on. And he's been covering it. We really don't know what's been going on with those boats that we've zapped with a drone or a Hellfire missile or whatever it was. We don't know. We don't know if they were like contacted and said, over loudspeakers or something, stop, you're going to be arrested, stop. If you don't stop, we will shoot. We just know that they've been shot. Were they given a chance to surrender? We don't even have, to my knowledge, and because he would have said if he knew it, we don't even have positions. Was it inside of, probably not, inside of Venezuelan territorial waters, which is 12 miles. Was it in the Venezuelan exclusive economic zone, which is still international waters for shipping and moving, but meaning to plunk down a oil well, or they control the fishing rights or whatever, in their exclusive economic zone? Was it in there? Which we can still get vessels that's still considered out in the open ocean, not on territorial control area. Was it in there? Or was it much closer to some other place? These boats, my understanding, the 2 or 3 that they've hit, were not going to be able to make it to the U.S. They were not the type that would get all the way from Venezuela to the U.S. But that might have gotten to, whether it's Puerto Rico or the Dominican Republic or Haiti or someplace else, and then whether that boat then gets refueled and goes on, or some other some other means of smuggling goes from that other point. And maybe these were on the second leg, meaning they may have been north of Cuba, or going through the Gulf of America now, or something like that. We don't, in international waters, we really don't know a lot about these. But even if they were hit just outside of Venezuelan waters, well, we have declared Tren de Awaga, or whatever, how you pronounce it, and some of these other groups as terrorists. And they're not Islamic terrorists. The only thing, how political are they versus just criminal would be a question. But we see Britain in the 19th century declaring wars against slavers, including the very, very brief war of less than a few hours against Zanzibar. And they take Zanzibar and keep it until they give it up as part of modern-day Tanzania, because it was a slave trading island. And so we see Britain going out and using military force as needed. I mean, they didn't want to sink vessels full of slaves if they didn't have to, obviously, because they were trying to stop the slave trade. But they would happily sink once they got the slaves off, or if it was determined to be a slaver heading back to Africa to pick up more slaves, they could, of course, sink it if the vessel, put up a fight. So we do see historical precedent over what would be not so much critical, but violent, opposition to, to what we consider lawful order. So we've declared these boats to be an enemy. And so because of the natures, clearly these boats are not fishing boats. You don't have $10,000 or $50,000 or whatever it is of engines on the back of these boats, because these are very, very high-powered, very modern engines that they're buying. Fishermen just don't have that financial ability to do that stuff. So we know that these are, criminal boats doing criminal things. So I think it's a legitimate use of force. So I support it. And so long as it stays in that sort of realm, we're not trying to put troops, we're not invading Venezuela with troops or whatever. I think it's good. Venezuela, they had bought, I think in either late 90s or early 2000s, some really nice sort of corvettes from somewhere in Europe, 2 or 3 of them, I think it was. And now they're up in on dry docks in a thing that are overgrown with weeds and probably not functional, literally not functional now. They at least were smart enough at the time to get them out of the water to try to preserve them. But Venezuela doesn't functionally have a navy of any real sort. So long as it stays sort of a campaign against either aggression against Guyana or other neighbors potentially, or dealing with the unconventional warfare. And I do take both the drug trade and the TDA, we'll call it that because I can pronounce that better, the TDA gang sent to America. I do count that as and the floods of South Americans coming into the U.S. as versions of unconventional warfare. Sure, the most of those people that are coming up are not carrying AK-47s, but the TDA does arm themselves and does attack American citizenry and American law enforcement here in America. So that is in a military, again, unconventional, but still a military invasion. So military force is justified. You do not have to suffer attacks. You do not have to suffer invasions, even unarmed invasions of your country, whatever country it may be. No one gets to come into your country, whatever your country is, without the position or the permission of your country. And you can use all necessary force to stop it, which would include, I see videos of like Poland trying to stop people from the Middle East that Russia or Belarus or whoever, various places, have allowed to come in, and they're trying to cross into the Polish border, and the Poles are grabbing them. Hell, I just say machine gun them. I mean, literally, and I don't say this lightly. Sometimes I talk with people and they come back, well, you said you should just kill them. No, I said one of the effective ways to deal with them is to kill them. Not that that's how I want to deal with them. But once you build a fence, like I see in videos along the Polish border, and then these people are cutting their way through, what are you going to do? Are you going to spend the next 20 or 30 years playing whack-a-mole with them coming through? And if Russia and Belarus and whoever else know that, well, oh, hey, they can stop 4 attacks, cutting parties to cut through the fence at any one time in a section, but if they get to 8 or 10, well, they overrun the Polish ability to snatch up these people, and the people will break through and get inside of Poland. Hell, no, it's on the freaking border. The reason the Berlin Wall and the other sort of Soviet-era walls were considered evil is because they were locking average people in. They weren't considered evil if they were trying to keep people out. The only people in the West we think we should lock in are people that we've justifiably said were criminals or similar such things, prisoners of war or whatever, that we can justifiably lock them in, and then we can do it. See, and so there's a justifiable reason for locking people in either, including large groups, prisoner of war camps or whatever, prisons and whatnot. But to lock in a standard population just because they see a better thing somewhere else, and West Germany was willing to take in East Germans, so it isn't like we're Poles or Europeans being flooded by people that they don't want in. But if you're looking at the immediate border, there's no question that it's an invasion, and I have no reason that I see why deadly force, and this is any sort of border that has any sort of defenses. You look at some of the waters along the U.S.-Mexican border. Now we're building fences, but before there was no fence. So, people could mistakenly, I didn't realize I was crossing it. Of course they knew. But if it's, but once you put in proper defense, fencing and whatnot, anybody crossing, you can use deadly force to protect it. You do not have to determine that they are going to use deadly force to try to cross it. You can just use deadly force to stop the invasion. Whether they have arms or not, it doesn't matter, in my opinion. You can defend your country from invasion. we can talk all about people who want refugee status, but those are people who come up to border crossings and say, hey, I'm a refugee, I want to come in. And you can decide at that moment to let them in or not. That's a different matter. So all the people coming up to U.S. border crossings, and we're giving them status as refugees or whatever, well, whether I agree with it or not, that's one thing. But you're not a legitimate refugee fleeing across a defended border. And so deadly force can be used, I think. And I also think, because I say these as unconventional warfare, I think it only takes a few shooting incidents and these people will stop coming because they don't want to be shot. It's because they see it as a game. They see it, well, if we don't make it this week, we'll try again next week. We'll try again the week after next. But if it's, oh shit, if we don't make it, we're dead, they'll stop coming. And so, and that's the point, is that they're supposed to stop coming. Okay, Reagan Rob is saying, appreciate the discussion. I always learn something. Yep. I hope, I try to educate, but also give my opinions. You don't have to, I like it when people disagree with me, so long as they have reasoned arguments. I'm happy for that because I know that I may have either bad facts or bad opinions. Because I changed my opinions over the years, but like I say, right now, I believe nations have the right to defend themselves from invasion. If non-violent or non-deadly, I should say, means are not effective, meaning you have a guy with a sign that says stop or alto or whatever, holds that up and the people stop and go back, and they're not doing that. And when you try to stop them or arrest them or whatever, they run and struggle and whatnot. I think deadly force is justified. But it's grandma coming across. Well, she shouldn't freaking come across. She knows it's not right. So you can use deadly force, whether it's Poland, the U.S. border, wherever, so long as it's clearly marked and fenced off reasonably. It doesn't have to be a super fence. It just has to be a reasonable fence. Because in the olden days, my granddad had a ranch that was near, not on, but near the border with Mexico and California. And I spent a lot of time down there. And now it was not so far, like 10 miles or something. I don't know the exact distance from the ranch to the actual border, but it was longer to go to the nearest crossing. And sometimes, as a family trip, we would go into Mexico to the city, and go through the regular, just drive in and go through the Mexican gates and come back and through America through it just right. But a couple other times we visited the border, and all it was basically sort of a cattle fence. If you know what a barbed wire cattle fence looks like, with just a couple of extra strands and sort of a clear spot so you could sort of see tracks if people crossed it. And you could and there was signs up, ever so often along it. But that was it for many miles, 50, 60 miles easy. That was the only thing. So it was a freaking cattle fence with a sign, every half a mile or whatever, with a sign, this is U.S. border, do not cross, blah, 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 blah. Mexico didn't put up any fencing or any signs on their side of the border. Okay, well that, climbing over or through that cattle fence type thing is not much. And I don't know that would qualify as something that I would say is usable to use deadly force if people try to cross it. But if you built a more proper chain link fence with razor wire on top of it and a few other sorts of things, and then if people are crossing that with signage in reasonable numbers of languages, then deadly force, in my opinion, is justified and I think would solve the problem. Okay, I want to thank Raygun Rob, Ship Commander LOL, Repeat, Beam Slam, IKB's already gone away, Arno, ZZ, and Sing, I know who's also left, and Folk for hanging out with me today and watching me play some games, and Holiday Punch earlier. I'm just going up the chat here. You make it fun to hang out and talk with you. I will be leaving now. I'm planning on playing starting again at 10 a.m. my time. Tomorrow, some War Thunder, so I hope you join us to either watch or hang out and play. So doing that tomorrow, so that's at least the plan. So I want to thank you all and hopefully see you then. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day. Or